For more analysis, we are joined by Khalid Nassif, a researcher on Israeli affairs from Ramallah, and from Cairo, Bashir Abdel Fattah, a researcher at the Al Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies. Welcome, and it's a good day to have you with us on the show today to oversee what's going on in the region. And we start off a very good day. Mr. Abdel Fattah.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
It's our utmost pleasure, sir. Mr. Abdel Fattah, how do you foresee Iran's military and political response to the recent Israeli attacks, considering the limited damage reported?
First of all, let me welcome our colleague from Palestine. We can say that the area is in the tour or the stage of strategic evaluation for the Israeli strike on Iran. I think it's early to predict how can Iran deal with the Israeli strike. Some Iranian formals declared that Iran will respond so soon to the Israeli strike, according to the Article 51 of the UN doctrine. But in my poor opinion, I don't think that Iran will militarily respond on the Israeli strike, because before the Israeli attack, the Iranian formals declared that if Israel attacked Iran with an opportunal strike or proportional strike, Iran will never respond. And I think now the Israeli strike is proportional, so I don't think that Iran will respond. In addition to that, the Americans put pressures on Netanyahu in order to reduce the strike against Iran, so as not to avoid the nuclear reactors and also the oil institutions. So I think as long as the Americans obliged Netanyahu not to attack nuclear and the oil institutions, I think they will oblige Iran not to respond to the Israeli strike.
Sir, was there any indication that Iranian intelligence had prior knowledge of Israel's planned airstrikes, and how might this affect their operational readiness?
I think the Americans intended to do that because before this process, the Americans asked the Israelis to keep them up to date of what the Israelis planning to attack Iran. But Netanyahu refused to share the American administration's any plans or projects to deal with the Iran. So the American intelligence succeeded to interfere and to make some sort of penetration into the Israeli decision-making centers. And they succeeded and managed to do that.
So, sir, you believe that the United States interfered and changed the decision of Israel?
I think so.
Okay.
Because
then,
yes.
Then why doesn't the United States interfere to change what's going on and the atrocities and the, of course, genocides that are taking place in Gaza and now Lebanon?
It's a different issue. Because the United States and the Biden administration is supporting Netanyahu and Israel all the time, according to what's happening in Gaza or South Lebanon. But Iran is something different. Iran is a state with sovereignty. Iran is an organized army, not a militia. So any confrontation, direct confrontation, comprehensive confrontation between Israel and Iran might lead to an explosion in the Middle East or a comprehensive war in the Middle East, which is not acceptable by Biden administration. during the election era, and also it might affect the strategic interests of the United States in the Middle East. So they tried to classify or to divide or to separate between what's happening in Gaza and South Lebanon and the confrontation, the military comprehensive confrontation between Iran and Israel. It's something different. That's why they interfered in order to put pressures on Netanyahu not to expand the confrontation with Iran.
Mr. Abdel Fattah, given the state of affairs at the moment, do you see us moving further from or closer to the agonizing possibility of regional war engulfing the entire Middle East?
Till now, we can say that everything is under control. I was afraid of the Israeli strike against Iran. If Israel attacked the nuclear reactors or the oil institutions, I think this might lead to a regional confrontation between Israel and Iran, and it might track many other regional actors like Syria, like Turkey. But now, as long as the Israeli strike against Iran was controlled by the Americans and avoided the nuclear and oil institutions, I think everything is still under control, and we cannot reach regional military confrontation till now at least. Maybe perhaps we can find a military confrontation, regional confrontation, according to miscalculations between Iran and Israel. But I don't think that the Americans will lead or will leave them to do that.
Sir, of course, Mr. Bashir Abdel Fattah, thank you very much for your informative knowledge, and thank you for adding value to our program. A researcher at Al-Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies. Thank you very much for being with us in our show In Depth to Date. And we move on now we're joined by Khaled Nassif, a researcher on Israeli affairs from Ramallah, I would like to ask you and start with you a question, sir. A very good day, and it's a warm welcome to have you with us on the show.
Good afternoon. Very happy to be with you and to be with your dear audience. Thank you.
Sir, did the United States manage to rein in Israel and force its hand to scale back the scope of its retaliation against Iran? And if so, why isn't the United States applying the same amount of pressure to force Israel to accept a ceasefire and an exchange deal in Gaza and Lebanon, since it could, apparently?
According to my analysis, in this part, the United States has not forced Israel to limit its response or its aggression against Iran. However, the United States did not support the Israelis as much as they hoped in this aggression in particular. And according to the initial analysis that Israel alone cannot attack the nuclear establishments or the oil facilities or any strategic institutions in Iran without the support of the United States. So the United States used the lack of direct support in this aggression for the sake of preventing the development of this aggression into a regional war, because the United States, especially in the time of elections, is not interested in opening this front or opening a new escalation and aggression in the region. This is not what I would call pressure, but it's a strategy which is preventing a direct support that allows Israel to target the vital Iranian locations or sites or oil facilities or nuclear establishments. Thus, the United States could limit the Israeli aggression against Tehran and Iran. Finally, the Iranian response will be in the same framework within a limited and direct targeting of military locations, not strategic locations in the state of occupation. The United States tried to act the role of or practice indirect pressure by not providing full support. They only provided support in case of, they will support them in case of the Iranian response or if there are any missiles targeting the Israeli entity, but they will not support in this strike. This is to limit its influence on Iran. This can be overcome if there is a reach to a ceasefire in the different fronts, either in Gaza Strip or in Lebanon, knowing that what our dear colleague from Cairo said, which is from a strategic point of view, is that Iran is a state that has an army, but the open fronts in Gaza or in Lebanon are a resistance. They're just sections or militias fighting Israel because they are attacking these regions and they're not up to the level of a state.
Okay,
with its full power.
Mr. Nassif, I would like to take, of course, your take and understanding of how you think Israel's strategy of targeting less critical components of Iran's air defense system indicates an intention to avoid a larger conflict at this point?
It's possible at any time that this conflict would develop. Based on different calculations, this conflict can be developed, and no one can speculate regarding anything regarding the development of this conflict, but still it's a possibility. Up till now, Iran reserves a right to respond to this aggression. And this response against Israel, if the Israelis or the United States or the Western countries would target Iran, this conflict would turn into a battle. The possibilities and the odds are open. There is no guarantee of limiting this into an all-out war. There's no guarantee that Israel will not go in a war against Iran, but there's an attempt to practice an American control on this battle, because the United States is trying to practice pressure on the resistance or on the Arab side. But at certain moments, the United States try to practice pressure against Israel. And I believe that the latest aggression was a result from this pressure, but in indirect way, by using methods of lack of support or lack of involvement in this aggression that doesn't allow Israel to target a strong strike that would affect the strategic development of this war. I think the possibility of having a war is still open. Things can be calmed down if there's a ceasefire. If there's a ceasefire, we can say that this war has stopped and it will not be further developed in the future. But as long as these fronts are open, including the front of southern Lebanon and northern Gaza, in addition to the actions taking place in Jerusalem and the West Bank, so the possibility of the war will still exist, but we do not know when it would develop into a full explosion. This will be revealed over the days.
Mr. Nassif, in light of Vice President Harris's recent comments advocating for de-escalation in the region, And with the United States elections just around the corner, how do you think the contrasting approaches of Harris and Trump towards Iran and Israel will influence voter perceptions on foreign policy, especially in light of recent hostilities, sir?
Doubtlessly, the American statements and comments recently comes within the framework of the electoral process and attracting votes by both either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Regarding the strategic vision, who takes the final decision in the United States? It's the deep state represented in the Pentagon and the security, strategic, and military institutions in the United States. Regardless who will reside in the White House later on, they will not be able to exceed what I can call the leaders or the recommendations of these institutions that mainly serve the interest of the United States of America regarding escalation or lack of it.
Sir, the interest of the United States of America is the interest of Israel at this point. Sir, what is in the interest of the United States is exactly in the interest of Israel at this point?
Definitely. Israel's interest is linked to the United States' interest, and I believe that in general and in this period identified its main interest in the Middle East, which is the existence and domination and the strength of Israel in this region. That's why they provide the direct military and diplomatic and economic support to the Israeli entity. So the Israeli entity would be dominant in this region according to their own vision.
Okay, sir, I'm very sorry. We're running out of time. I had a lot of questions that I need to ask you, and I needed your informative knowledge, but, sir, we have to wrap up this episode. That was Khaled Nassif, a researcher on Israeli affairs from Ramallah. Thank you, sir, for your analysis, and that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Stay tuned for more exclusive stories here on Q News. Thanks for watching.